Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. You've certainly heard the phrase that when a dog is backed into a corner, it's going to bite. Right? It comes from this idea in nature, really, that when an animal is backed into a corner, is, threatened somehow, that it's going to attack because it's the only thing left for it to do, right? It's gone into survival mode. It's got the fight or flight reaction is on biologically. All the stress hormones are going in the body. Blood has moved away from its mid-region to its legs and its feet or its paws or whatever it is, and it's getting ready to attack because that's all there is left to do when it feels cornered. And surely you've also felt that way in your own life. Hopefully it isn't because you were physically threatened by somebody, but maybe that's what you've been through. But at some point in your life, you've probably felt completely backed into a corner. Like you have no options left. Everything feels like it's coming at you in every direction. Doors are getting slammed in your face. You are trying everything to protect yourself. You don't want to fight. You don't want to have to get into this mode, right? Just like the animal that's getting backed into a corner. Animals don't want to have this fight to bite back. You don't want to have to go through that. So you're looking for an out and you can't seem to find one. You are trying everything you can think of to get out of this situation. And it's not working. There's nothing. There's no outs. It's starting to feel hopeless. It's feeling like there's nothing you can do to make this situation better. It's feeling like there's nothing you can do to even get out of this situation. You feel like you're alone in it. You feel like there's nobody there to help you. And what happens? The very same biological reactions that happen to that animal happen to us too. The very same biological reactions that happen when we feel like we are pushed against a wall, against somebody that's physically threatening us, happens when we feel like we are backed into a corner with choices or with no choices anymore, backed into a corner because there are no choices anymore. Same thing happens. And we interpret that feeling as frustration. We feel so frustrated. We feel like there's nowhere to go. There's nothing we can do. We interpret that as frustration. And what happens when we feel frustrated is our stress level goes through the roof, no doubt. And that takes a tremendous toll on our health, our mental health, our ability to sleep, our ability to digest food, our ability to see what options we still have. Because the thing is, we're not actually physically being held up against a wall with nowhere to go. It just feels that way, right? And our brains cannot tell the difference between a physical threat of being attacked and a frustration from lack of choices in our life. And this pertains to the topic that we talk about on Delivering Miracles all the time, which is infertility or high-risk pregnancy, having a baby in the NICU, taking care of a child with medical complications. It happens here, right? Because you start to feel like you don't have choices in your medical care. You don't have choices with your health. You don't have choices with how to have the family or the life that you're dreaming of. But our brain can't tell the difference between the two, between being actually physically attacked versus feeling like we don't have options in how we grow our family or have the life that we dream of with our families. Our brains can't tell the difference. And the problem is, in this case, we do have choices. But the way our body and our biology work, the way that we physically experience changes because we feel backed into a corner, one of the side effects of that is we can't see all the options clearly. So part of what we need to do to get out of that corner, why we need to do that is so that we can see the options that are still available to us, which we cannot see when we feel pushed up against a wall. When we feel like all the doors are slamming around us, you can't see it. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's not because you're not being open-minded or you're being too pessimistic. None of that. It's physiologically, neurologically, you cannot see it. Your body has gone into, we got to fight this. There's no other way out but brute force. Except what's brute force when you're looking for options on how to get pregnant or stay pregnant or take care of your family, right? There is none. And that just feeds into the stress. So today I want to talk to you about what to do when you're backed into a corner. And the thing that I want you to take home today is that you only have the options that you can see. And by calming your brain and your body, you can actually identify options you've never considered before. And that's going to get you out of that corner and back in control of your life. I've been having a lot of conversations and new clients lately who are struggling with fertility issues. This is new actually for me. I'll be really honest with you. My primary focus is women who are going through a high-risk pregnancy and having pregnancy complications. But more and more, I've been hearing from women who are struggling to get pregnant. They're really resonating with the message, even though they're not pregnant yet. But that the frustration, the grief, the lack of control, the helplessness, all that stuff that we talk about that happens when you have a high-risk pregnancy, it's really resonating with a lot of women who are struggling with getting pregnant. So I've had several of these clients recently in the last several months. And there's one in particular who I was thinking about when I was putting this episode together because of the work that we had done together. This was a huge piece of this. This was a huge piece of our work together because she came to me extremely frustrated, like to the point where she's like, seriously, I think life hates me. Like there's somebody up there somewhere. She was not religious, but there's someone somewhere in the universe that freaking hates me. That's what she was convinced of. Okay. And I gotta say, I understand the sentiment. I have been there many times myself, believing that somebody somewhere has a really sick sense of humor and is taking it out on my life. And so I totally get it. Her deal was she was struggling to get pregnant. Okay. They were doing everything. She had gone to see several fertility specialists. She had done all the testing. Her husband had done all the testing. They had tried alternative therapies, acupuncture for both of them, acupressure for both of them, Reiki and cupping and supplements. They changed their diets. They were changing their exercise routine. I mean, they were doing everything. If you looked at them and you saw what they were doing, you would be like, I don't understand why you're still not pregnant. You're doing everything right. They had their embryos tested. Everything was normal, at least as normal as we can test for. They did even alternative testing that not all fertility clinics do. I mean, they went above and beyond and then above and beyond that. And she was freaking frustrated. Why can't I have a baby? And the only thing left to do was to blame herself for it. And in which case she didn't really internalize it, but she blamed life or this being somewhere that had this channel on of their life that was just funny, or this like puppet somewhere in the universe that was making this happen for them. And so she blamed this being for hating her and making this happen, right? She couldn't find any other way to explain it because she had done everything right. Her partner had done everything right. And it was taking a tremendous toll on her body. She would cry all the time. Everything would set her off. When she couldn't find her keys within 2 seconds, even if she wasn't late to go to work, she'd cry. When she was cooking and she realized that they ran out of an ingredient that she needed, they were going to go to the store the next day, but she didn't have it right then in that moment for the recipe she was using. And she burst into tears. When she couldn't relax at the end of the day, and she knew she was tired, she knew she needed the sleep, she knew she needed to slow down and stop and go to bed that night, and she wanted to sleep. She was exhausted, but her brain wouldn't shut off. She'd burst into tears. And that's not to say for all the bigger stuff, right? When she'd get baby shower invitations, she'd see pictures of babies on Facebook. She would walk in her neighborhood and see new moms pushing strollers. When her husband would make an offhanded remark that was very, very benign, had no meaning, hidden meaning behind it, and she interpreted that as like a shot at her for not being able to have kids. I mean, it's all of that. All of it was just setting her off. She was a ticking time bomb, and everything was setting her off. And the biggest toll that it took on her was what she was then putting in her body. She started eating terrible food. Terribly. She ate chips all the time. And she told me she didn't even like chips. It was like the biggest sweet tooth of her life. I mean, that you would ever meet in anyone. She has such a big sweet tooth. But she just started stuffing her face with chips, not because she wanted them, but something about them made her feel better. Like it gave her that short-term boost to her mood. Almost like a drug, right? When I'm not a smoker, but so actually we, as a little quick aside, my husband and I started watching Mad Men a while back. We're so late to all bandwagons as it relates to TV and movies. So I realized Mad Men came out like 10, 12 years ago, something ridiculous like that. So what's new right now? Like Game of Thrones, we'll probably watch it in like 2025 and I'll have an episode about Game of Thrones. Oh my God, did you see? That's how it is. So taking blast from the past here, we're watching Mad Men. This show is about advertising on Madison Avenue, New York City in the 50s and 60s, which doesn't matter. But what I was pointing to was that it reminded me of it because everybody on that show smokes constantly. I mean, like so much that you don't realize how much we've taken smoking out of our media in terms of TV or movies until you watch Mad Men. You go, oh my God, they're pulling out another cigarette. And from what I hear, it's relaxing, right? When you're stressed out, you smoke. When you're anxious, you smoke. When you're worked up about something, you smoke, right? Same thing. This is what happened to her with chips. She's waiting for a doctor's call. She's eating chips. She came back from a doctor's appointment that didn't make her feel good. She's eating chips. The chips had become her cigarettes, if you will. It made sense in my head. This connected in my head. all this to say, the frustration, the stress, the feeling like all these options were gone for her translated into her crying at the drop of a hat because she was so overloaded and so frustrated that she needed every part of her life, everything else to go perfectly. And when it didn't go perfectly, and let's be real, when does it ever go perfectly? Never. She'd be crying because she just couldn't take anymore. And that came out in what she was putting in her body, which for her ended up being chips because it just, for some reason, gave her that boost. The carbs possibly just gave her that boost in the mood that she's looking for, like any other drug would. You know, maybe you find yourself drinking. Maybe you find yourself smoking cigarettes. Maybe you find yourself doing some other kind of recreational drugs. We turn to something else sometimes to give us the boost that we're looking for because we just cannot find it in ourselves. And it was all coming from the fact that she couldn't see the options anymore. How am I going to have a child? How am I going to have a baby? Now, you might be sitting here going, well, why doesn't she just adopt? Why doesn't she just do this? Why doesn't she just do that? I'm hoping you're not, because if you're listening to this podcast, you're likely in this situation or you have been, and you know that those options are not easy to come to. But it hits home the fact that some of us on the outside can see options that she can't because she's in the thick of it and she's so frustrated. She has become that rabid dog that's cornered and cannot see a way out. And so she's going to fight. Except in this case, because the threat is emotional, there's nobody to fight except herself. And so guess what she does? She stops taking care of herself. She cries. She doesn't sleep well. She eats chips all the time. And if you're listening to this, I bet you can relate to this. That feeling, maybe it's not chips for you. Maybe it's chocolate. Maybe it's alcohol. I don't know. But I know you get it. That moment when you feel like there is nothing left for me to do. I don't know what else there is. And I share this story with you because the work that we did really shifted the way that she was thinking. And so I'm going to tell you how we shifted that. And I want you to keep an open mind about this because I know it's going to be hard to hear. What we did was we focused less on her circumstance and what she wanted. Here's what I mean by that. When you're going through infertility, you just can't have a baby, or you're going through a high-risk pregnancy and you've got these complications that you just want them to go away because you're so scared of what it's going to do to the baby you're carrying. Or you're in the NICU, right? You just want out. I've been through all of those things. And it becomes your sole focus. It becomes the only thing that you can think about. And what ends up happening is then you see all the ways everybody else has what you have, or everybody else has what you can't have. Well, you're trying so desperately to have that you can't. You want your situation to get better. You want to be out of that situation. You want it all to get better. But you know as well as I do that when it comes to so many of these health situations, infertility, high-risk pregnancy, a baby in the NICU, a child with health complications, you know as well as I do, you don't get to choose when or how they get better. Another, quick aside here, there's a whole mind-body conversation we can have on how we can influence our health to improve our fertility or our pregnancy health. And that's actually coming up in a few weeks. So keep an eye out about that. But for the most part, so much of those circumstances are not in our control, right? I'm all about control, but I'm about realistic control. I know you want your tubes to work again, but you can't will them to work, right? I know you want your complications to just disappear. And yes, there are things you can do to influence that, but they're not going to completely disappear just because you want them to. I know you want your baby out of the NICU. And you want your baby home with you. I know you want to undo the prematurity. And I know that you would do anything at all if you could make that possible. I know because I would have. If somebody had told me to go to the moon, I would have done it. And that's a really big deal because I'm completely terrified of space. Like, terrified of space. Like, I cannot walk into a planetarium. That kind of terrified. Right? Like, I know you would do that if you could, but the reality is these circumstances, so much of them are not in our control. But what is in our control is how we react to them, what we do about being in that situation. So many people say, how's it possible for infertility to not be stressful? Well, I'm not saying all the stress is going to go away, but it doesn't have to be nearly as stressful as you're feeling right now, because you get to choose how you react to what's happening. You get to choose how you react to the complications that you have during your pregnancy. You get to choose how you feel in the NICU. I'm not saying it's going to be puppies and unicorns all the time, but it doesn't have to be as bad as it is right now because we make it less about the circumstance and so much more about what you want to feel. Now, notice I didn't say what you want most. Okay. And this is the question that I asked my client that really shifted things around. And this is something I've done for myself too, which has really profoundly changed my life. Is I ask myself, and I asked her to ask herself, and now I ask you to ask yourself, what do you want to feel most? Not what do you want most. I know what you want. You want to get pregnant. You want to have your complications go away. You want your baby home with you. You want your child's medical issues to disappear. I know you want that really badly, but that's not what we're focusing on because that is what keeps you in the corner. So the focus is, what do you want to feel? Not what you want. What do you want to feel? How do you want to feel right now? I find it easiest to choose this, to ask myself this, the minute my eyes open when I wake up in the morning. And, like that point where I'm slightly coherent in the morning before I get out of bed, but before I'm like really up and around and going with my day, like I really try to make this one of the very first thoughts that I have in my day, which is how do I want to feel today? And usually a word or a short phrase will pop up. A little while ago, I had a day where the day before I'd gotten some really bad news. And so that the next morning when I opened my eyes and I started trying this, because I was feeling similar to how this client was feeling and how you have probably felt, I just felt like there were no more options left. And I was so done with feeling like I was being dragged behind a car that was speeding away at 250 miles an hour. I was tired of it. I was tired of the bumps and the bruises and the cuts and the scrapes, and I needed it to stop. So that morning I woke up, I opened my eyes, and I just, that feeling after you get bad news where for a moment you forget and then it hits you, and then it hits you so hard. It's kind of like an anvil coming and sitting on your chest going, oh God, that just happened. And the next question I asked myself was, how do I want to feel today? Obviously, I wanted the situation to get better. I wanted the bad news to become good news. I wanted all of it to disappear. But that wasn't the question. The question was, how do I want to feel today? And the word that popped in my head was slow. I wanted to feel slow. And if you think about it, that word makes sense, right? After you feel like you've been in a boxing match and you've just been pummeled to the ground by life, who wouldn't want to go slow, right? You're tired. You got to lick your wounds a little. You got to just chill out and like regroup, maybe get your bearings straight a little. Maybe you just need to hide out for a while. And I like doing it this way because it's only for a day that you're committing to this. It's not a whole week. It's not a month. It's definitely not a year because things change. Life is so dynamic. So let's do this every day. And essentially, when you do this, what happens is you're setting your intention for the day. And look, I know that sounds super fluffy and I get it. And if somebody had sent this to me a few years ago, I would have been like, yeah, okay, thanks for that. That's not going to work for me. Goodbye. But look, there's actually a neurological component to this about why this works. All it means is that when you create that word, when you set that word or that phrase, you figure it out and you identify it in the morning, you prime your brain to look for opportunities to make that a reality. Let me give you an example of how this works. So back in the day, in my previous life, when I used to teach social psychology up at UC Berkeley, we'd get to a point in the class where I would give them an assignment after that class, which was I'd first ask them to pick a color, any color, whatever color comes to your mind, but don't pick like a rainbow or polka dot, but just pick a color. They'd all pick a color, they'd write it down. And then I'd ask them, I want you to leave the class, this lecture hall today, and find as many cars of that color as possible. And every time I would have this reaction where the class would burst into laughter because they'd be like, oh my God, I picked pink. Like there's no pink cars. I picked purple, magenta, like these really obscure colors that otherwise would be fine to pick, suddenly became hilarious and unattainable. Because like I've never seen a pink car before. I've never seen how many magenta cars could there be? The thing is, you'd be surprised because when you're looking for it, you see so many of them. And you can even try this today. After this episode's over, pick a color and start looking for those cars. You'll be surprised how much you see. And that's the same thing that happens when you pick a word of the day of how you want to feel. By doing that, you're priming your brain to look for opportunities to help you feel how you want to feel, Does that make the circumstance go away? No. Does it improve the situation? No, not really. It's not a Band-Aid for anything, but it puts you back in control because you get to decide how you experience the next 24 hours, or really less because you're not awake for that long. For me, on the day that I wanted to feel slow, I made choices differently. I went through my morning routine differently. I actually got up. I usually get up and I either get into my workout clothes or I take a shower if I know that I won't have time to work out in the morning. And this time I just rolled out of bed, put on my robe and walked out into the kitchen just like that. I just didn't want to think about doing too much. I didn't want to plan too far ahead. That's what I needed in that moment. And that's a really big deal because for somebody like me, I love planning. I love having an agenda. I love having ideas of exactly what's going to happen next and all of that. And so I was really trusting my body that it knew what it needed. And that day I needed to chill out and go slow. And then as I was going through my morning routine, getting everything ready to go, I caught myself trying to multitask because I'm very good at it. And it's just kind of a default mode for me is multitasking. And it immediately felt horrible. And it probably always feels that way, but I don't notice it because it's not important for me to not multitask, if that makes sense. But it became obvious to me that day because I had primed my brain to help me find opportunities to go slow. And here I was doing the exact opposite. And it felt so much worse that day that it actually made me stop and go, what am I doing? What am I doing? And it was awesome because you know what was really great about it? I actually slowed down. I stopped multitasking. And I just went and did one thing at a time. And the best part of all of this is that it forces you to focus on your body and what your body needs, right? Because you can talk yourself in and out of anything like I can. We all can. We can tell ourselves all day long, which we do, I'm fine. I'm relaxed. This is not so bad. I'm not stressed. When your body is clearly screaming at you otherwise, right? But by focusing on your body and what you need most, and that really comes at a time in the morning when you don't have that much going on where it's just kind of this instinct that comes up when you just ask yourself, what do I want to feel today? And it's just this word that comes up. When you do that, you're really tapping into what you need most without your, type A-ness or type B-ness or what you think you should be doing, clouding any of that. And look, the words don't even have to be so chill, oh, I need peace. I need slowness. I need to chill. Sure, great if that's what you want, but they can also be intense or more intense words too. You want to feel focused some days, or you want to feel productive some days. That's okay. There was a day when I woke up and I opened my eyes and the word that came to mind was productive. Because I was behind on deadlines. I had so much work to do. I knew I needed to be focused that day. And so that primed my brain to make a conscious effort to look for opportunities to be productive. And this works great for those of you that are type A like me and love to hit goals, or if you're competitive and I can do this, this works great for you. Because it challenges you to do exactly what you set out to do. And so that day when I was committed to the word productive, it became so easy to not answer texts that came through while I was working, or to be on Facebook between client sessions, or whatever it is that I would have otherwise been doing. It was really easy to turn it off that day because I knew that was not in line with what I wanted, and my brain was helping me with that. Because I'd primed it for that word at the beginning of the day, and it was helping me look for opportunities to stay in line with that. I was setting the intention. I was looking for ways to make this my reality. You prime your brain to be ready for it, and then you do it. And it works amazingly. And you know what happens is, in the case of trying this when you're facing infertility, loss, high-risk pregnancy, baby in the NICU, anything like that where it feels like you're so not in control, it takes your attention away from that circumstance that you can't control and puts the focus on what you can control, which is how you feel. And then you look for opportunities to feel that way. And then really amazing things come from that, things you might not even realize. This client that I started telling you about, so this is part of the work that she and I had done together, and I'd suggested this to her. She seemed really open to it, so she tried it. And what ended up happening for her was she ended up getting the guts to email her doctor some research that she and I had been discussing in one of our sessions, which is something she never would have done, ever. Because she was one of those patients that was like, I'm not going to challenge my doctor. I don't want to question him. He knows what he's talking about. And she never in a million years would have ever done this. But when she primed her brain to look for opportunities to get back in control, and she did this exercise for several days, I think a couple of weeks in a row, what it started to help her realize is, hey, she's not this helpless victim in a situation that feels pretty darn awful. She's not helpless. There are still things she can do. And all of a sudden, when she got in control, she was able to see options that she hadn't considered before. One of which was asking her doctor about some research that she never would have considered doing had she not met me or had she not done these exercises and gotten herself back in control. And you know what that did? Then the ripple effect from that was it opened up a dialogue with her physician that she never would have had before, which then opened up a door for her as an opportunity to continue trying to grow her family, which she had never considered as an option before. It involved some experimental testing that I know because she was so risk averse by that point, she would have said no to it. But she actually had a conversation, educated herself about it, and it became an option for her. It's so simple, but it's so extremely powerful. And the impact of it is so far reaching. Because once you get back in control, you start to see doors that are still open that you hadn't been able to see before. And when you walk through one of those doors, you might see something you never thought was possible on the other side. Because the truth is, you only have the options that you can see. And the only way to see more options is by calming your brain and your body so you can keep an open mind about options you never considered before. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love it if you can head over to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, because the more subscribers and reviews we have, the higher this podcast ranks, and the more and more women struggling through infertility, a high-risk pregnancy, prematurity can tune in and listen in to Delivering Miracles for inspiration and tips and motivation on how to get through all of this with more confidence and more hope. Also, I would love to stay in touch. So follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The handles for all three are Parijat Desh. That's Parijatdesh. And so come over and follow me and say hi. I would love to meet you. Author Steve Maraboli says, incredible change happens in your life when you decide to take control of what you do have power over instead of craving control over what you don't. And I know that's easy to say when you're not in the thick of it, but it's a really powerful reminder, because I know your heart's breaking because you can't get pregnant yet, or you're dealing with complications, or your baby's fighting in the NICU, or your child has some lifelong complications. I get it. I've lived it. I'm living it now. But it doesn't make you completely helpless in your circumstances. It doesn't make you a victim of your circumstances. There are still things you can control, including how you feel every day. And when you do that, you'll be surprised what doors open for you. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do this.